Hello everyone, in today's video we're going to be moving on to part 2 of 3 of our little series on the Mooney 20 here, the lovely Mooney ovation. What we're doing today, of course, is we're going to be handling the cruise phase, as well as managing kind of a little bit of the navigational elements of this airplane, and then finally getting ready for descent. We have a very useful tool on this plane for descent. We'll get there in a minute. Let's get started. So one of the things I experienced when I flew this plane for the first time was basically traveling to very high altitudes. Now, by high altitudes, keep in mind when I fly things like the 182 around or the Piper Archer, you're going up to 3,500, sometimes you go up to 5,500. And this plane, those are like newbie altitudes. Man, those are rookie numbers as far as altitudes goes. And what I found so fascinating about this plane was the fact that it has such a good capability to get up there. It also has an amazing capability to get back down. Now, even though what you'll discover in a minute is how stupid fast this plane gets for its size, is it still has some pretty good capabilities. Now, if you had seen the previous video, I'd mentioned that there's some avionics bugs going on right now because of a recent patch for this one. Of course, it's got to time it for when I want to do an interesting video on it, right? But welcome to the joys of doing aviation videos. You have no control over all the bad things that happen to you. Just like the real plane. So the real plane I fly, of course, is Mooney 20 Juliet. This is a nice new modern version of this, one of the named Moonies. So a lot of the doodads in here I don't have access to. One of those doodads, of course, is, oxygen for anybody who needs to be able to breathe at some point at higher altitudes. And the other thing I don't have access to is a working autopilot that's consistently effective. Most of the time it works, some days it doesn't, some days it does. It's kind of one of those, which is actually very realistic. We also don't have a GPS on it. And the HSI is, it's decent, is the best way to kind of describe it. So I'm just kind of enjoying my little climb here. You can see I'm at 7,300 feet, and I'm still getting about 1,000 feet per minute, which is incredible. Remember, this is the big one. This is not the little Mooney that I get to fly. And we're just going to be leveling off at 7,500 feet there, which is right about there. Go ahead and push the nose down. The thing that will shock you with this plane, as I mentioned in the previous video, is how sensitive the controls are. The other thing that will shock you is just how heavy the controls are. Once you get up to these kinds of speeds, I'm just going to nose over and let the plane sort of accelerate on its own. You will be you will be impressed. Like I say, you will be very, very surprised with just how aggressive they can be. So we're going to give it a couple taps of trim. The folks over at Carinado made the trim much too aggressive. The trim of this plane is actually very pleasant. We're hand flying today, like I said, to deal with some of those kind of consequences. And one of the things you probably observed is I did not change my power setting. And the reason I did not change my power setting was on account of the fact that I don't need to change my power setting because I've gotten to my altitude. So I'm going to go ahead and engage my autopilot here, and I'm going to see it's going to shoot me to the moon. It's just like the autopilot on the one I fly, how authentic. But one of the things we have here is we actually have a handy-dandy little chart that tells us all of our cruise altitudes and our desired powers. So you can see here, if I wanted to do 75% power, that'd be 22.5 and 24. So I can use that knowledge to actually design that inside of here. So we're going to go ahead and back the power up to 22.5, just like that. And now, of course, we're going to leave our RPM alone at about 2,400 RPM, which is going to get us about the setting we want. But one of the things you probably observe here is down here in the left corner, you'll see that we're at 14.3 gallons per hour. If I stick my head up here, according to this, we should be at, let's see here, we should be 15.6 gallons per hour. And the reason for that, of course, comes down to our mixture and the way that the mixture is modeled inside of Flight Sim. So what we're going to do is we're going to lean the airplane. And now this is the part where everybody goes, wait, what? And you'll know exactly what I mean once we get to that particular phase. There we go. Nice and stiff controls, just like the real Mooney. All right, let's start leaning the mixture. Does anybody observe what's happening when I'm leaning the mixture? Yeah, if you're looking at the bottom left there, you'll probably have noticed that my fuel consumption went up. The reason it did that, of course, is because we are now producing more horsepower than we were a few moments ago. We were actually way too rich, so the engine wasn't using all the fuel that we were basically sending over to it, so it was giving us a bit of a problem in that regard. So the interesting thing is we're correctly mixture leaned right now, and we're just cracked out about that far. Now, one of the things you probably saw in that little chart a moment ago, and this seems really fun to trim, is the fact that there's also a best economy mixture. We can actually go down to 13.5 if we wanted to try to save some fuel. Of course, if we go down to 13.5 on the gallons per minute meter, that's also going to indicate that we're going to be producing less speed. Now, if you look over there on the left, our current speed is actually very, very high. Go ahead and stick my head down real fast here. You can see I'm doing about 154 indicated, 7,500. That's a 10%. What is that? 5%. That's about 175. So we are moving very, very, very quickly with this airplane right now. It's surprisingly, staggeringly quickly. And that's one of the things that makes this plane great, is even though I'm only burning 15.5 gallons per hour, this is basically perfect as far as what we need to do is performance-wise. And we're just scooting along here. Everything's well within the green. We don't have to deal with the cow flaps like we do in the version that I normally have to fly, which is nice. But I mean, cow flaps, it's just one more step, is the way I always look at cow flaps. It's not a bad thing. It's not a good thing. They're just there, is kind of the way I think about it. But like, just getting an idea. Now we're going to come to the next problem and challenge with this plane, and that is returning back from orbits. When I was first learning the plane, of course, I was not new to planes that routinely can travel 210 knots in a descent. That was a completely new experience for me. And there's a couple tools that we can use, of course, to help us out here. And we're basically heading out to Poughkeepsie, New York. And you can see kind of off my nose there, there's Torrington, kind of a little off to my left there. That's what that big city is that we're approaching right now. We're using pure dead reckoning, by the way, because their GPS doesn't work. But that's okay. And the problem you have with this plane is it's so fast that when you come back in from orbit with it, you're going to be basically having to get rid of a ton of speed when you finally get down to your destination. The other thing, too, is because we are a nice big engine, we want to be very gentle to it. We don't really want to pull back the throttle during our descent process. Whatever our cruise power becomes our descent power, which is something that we need to do. So what I'm going to do is fast forward to my point of descent here. There we go. And now we have a couple ways to do it. The simplest way, I like to call it, is the push to descend button. If I were to actually take a look out my window here, oops, sorry about that, and press my speed brake button, you'll see these two things pop out of the wing. We have speed brakes. Now, what that would do in the real plane is the nose would go like this, is the first thing that would happen. And then the second thing that would happen is you look away and you'd suddenly be doing 500 feet per minute descent rate. Perfection, like literally exactly the descent rate that you need, and you'd have a pretty substantial reduction in the speed. You could actually go down very steeply with this. Now, the interesting thing is the speed brakes that they modeled in this version are so strong that if I actually let go of the stick, you will see that we'll get ourselves a good solid, probably about 1,100 feet per minute by the time everything finally settles, which is ear-destroying. So we don't want to be that rude to whatever passengers we have. So the speed brake button, of course, if you didn't program it, please do it. It's going to be really helpful during the landing process. The second method we can use to descend is we can simply push the nose over on the plane until we get to 500 feet per minute again. The 500 feet per minute, of course, is pretty useful for us because that's going to get us that really, really solid descent rate. One of the next problem we're going to face is since we are in a descent, we have to do two things now. We have to correctly set our mixture, and another thing we have to deal with, of course, is we're going to now have to decrease our power as we descend because the air starts getting progressively thicker. But that is something we'll deal with on another day.